So, what happens to a kid when their entire world just disappears overnight? And I'm not just talking about their house, I mean their toys, their drawings, their bed, everything. It's more than just losing things, it's the complete erasure of their reality. In this explainer, we're going to break down the deep and often totally hidden trauma a child goes through when their world is literally taken from them.
Right. This idea of a protective envelope is absolutely key to getting this. It's that physical and emotional space where a kid feels safe, where the world actually makes sense, and where they can just be. So, what happens when that envelope isn't just damaged, but is suddenly and completely ripped away, leaving a child feeling totally exposed?
Well, the impact is what a lot of clinicians call a double trauma. First, you've got the shock of displacement. I mean, being torn away from the only home you've ever known. But then there's this second, brutal layer, a targeted deprivation where their belongings are taken on purpose. This just pours salt in the wound and turns a loss into a weapon. So, how does this kind of huge loss actually show up in a child's life? Well, it often starts with what look like small things, simple objects that actually act as anchors to their sense of stability and who they are. When those anchors are gone, a kid is just set adrift in this ocean of anxiety and fear. Okay, this helps us get why that one specific blanket or that really worn-out teddy bear is so, so important. See, according to the psychoanalyst D.W. Winnicott, these aren't just toys. They are critical tools for development that help a kid manage anxiety and feel secure as they learn to be more independent. They're kind of like a safe bridge between their own inner world and the big, scary outside world. So, when those critical anchors are just ripped away, a child's development can actually look like it's moving backward. Now, this isn't a conscious choice they're making, it's a subconscious survival mechanism. Their mind is desperately trying to retreat to a time before the trauma happened, back to a stage when life felt safer and more protected. And when you see these behaviors, it's so important to understand they are not signs of a child being naughty or just acting out. Bedwetting, years after they've been dry, starting to suck their thumb again, or this overwhelming fear of being away from a parent, these are the visible symptoms of a deep internal crisis. They are, quite literally, cries for help rooted in the catastrophic loss of their emotional anchors. These regressive behaviors, well, they're the outward sign of the trauma, but the wound itself goes so much deeper. It strikes at the very core of a child's developing sense of self, their history, and their identity. For a kid, these things are how they build and store who they are. That drawing stuck on the fridge, that collection of cool rocks, the school report they were so proud of. These aren't just things. They are real, tangible evidence that says, I am here, I did this, I matter. They're the building blocks of a person. And so, when all of that gets treated like garbage, the unspoken message that child gets is just devastating. The result is something psychologists call identity fragmentation. It's this massive blow to their self-worth, and it plants this little seed of doubt that says, if my whole history can be erased that easily, well, maybe I'm worthless too. When a child's entire world just vanishes without any warning, their brain can get stuck in a state of constant high alert. They're not really living anymore in a way that allows them to grow and be curious. They're just surviving. They're always braced for the next disaster. This right here, this is the absolute foundation of a healthy childhood. Ontological security is that deep gut feeling that your bed will be there tomorrow morning, that your home is a stable, predictable place. A total, sudden loss doesn't just damage this belief, it completely shatters it. And without that protective cocoon, the child is left with this constant humming anxiety in the background of everything. Their internal map of how the world works is destroyed. It's replaced by this terrifying belief that another total loss could happen at any second without any warning. The very ground beneath their feet just doesn't feel solid anymore. This state of constant anxiety can lead to what's known as traumatic hypervigilance. The child's nervous system gets locked in fight or flight, and it's always scanning the environment for the next threat. This internal state of emergency often shows up as really obsessive behaviors around any new things they get. This behavior is often called resource guarding. A kid might start hoarding little things, like scraps of paper or bits of food. They might have a complete and total meltdown if a new toy gets lost. Look, it's not about greed. It's not about being materialistic.
It's their brain's desperate, traumatized attempt to prevent another catastrophic loss by trying to control every single new thing that comes into their life. This table really gives you a clinical snapshot of just how all-encompassing this trauma is. It's a whole body, whole mind crisis. Emotionally, you're going to see intense anxiety. Cognitively, they might suddenly struggle in school. Socially, they pull back, feeling ashamed or just different from other kids. And physically, it can show up as nightmares or constant tummy aches. It literally affects every single part of their being. And that brings us to the final and honestly, probably the most difficult part of this whole story. It is so critical to understand that this kind of total loss is often not an accident. It's not a fire or a flood. In so many of these cases, it is a deliberate, calculated act of abuse. The destruction or withholding of a family's stuff is a textbook tactic of what's known as coercive control. And in these horrible situations, even if the abuse is aimed at one parent, the child becomes a profound secondary victim of that power dynamic. In this dynamic, the abuser basically weaponizes the family's own possessions. Every single photo album, every piece of clothing, every school report card becomes a hostage. They're turned from objects of comfort and memory into tools used to inflict constant pain and maintain power. And the strategy behind this cruelty is just chillingly precise. It really has two main goals. The first is logistical, to paralyze the targeted parent. Without documents, computers, or resources, they can't function, they can't fight back. The second goal is emotional, to maintain control. By holding property hostage, the abuser forces the other parent to keep coming back, to keep begging, reestablishing their dominance with every single painful conversation. And all of this leaves us with a really profound and difficult question. Understanding the immense damage is, of course, the first step, but it can't be the last. The real challenge is figuring out how to restore a child's fundamental sense of safety and value and history when the physical proof of their life has been completely erased. How do you help them rebuild? Maybe that's a topic for another day.